American freedom had its roots in the 17th century ideals from which it sprang. One of the most cherished of these was the freedom of the press. Long before the American Revolution, the colonial editors fought against political control, believing that only a freely informed people can be a freely governed people. One of these editors, German-born John Peter Zenger, dared to publish an attack on the corruption of the colonial government in 1734. In the columns of his little New York newspaper, he appealed to his readers to save him from reprisals. Soon after, the paper was burned, and he was sent to jail. But at his trial, one of the ablest lawyers of the time, Andrew Hamilton, led the attack on the forces that wanted to enslave the press. He was backed by popular sentiment and a growing conviction that a free press could lead the way to a free country. That fight was but a spark that was later fanned into a great fire for freedom, and out of it, a new nation was born. The Constitution of the new United States was amended by a Bill of Rights that guaranteed the people a free press. The ideal had become the law of the land and would be enforced wherever the new flag should fly. That ideal still lives today in the minds of the men who gather and print the news, in the people who make news, and more important, in the people who read the news and depend for their lives and freedom on honest facts. The more complicated life we live, the greater is our need for a free and responsible press to report it and clarify it. The American people have come to take this responsibility for granted. They expect to get the news, whether it be good or bad. They expect to get the truth, whether it be palatable or not. They expect to be told what is happening, whether they earn their living working in a factory or by building dams on the rivers. They need a free press to be free citizens. They need a free press to know what other men are doing in cities and countries that are far removed from their homes. For their markets, as well as their daily lives, are determined in part by what other people are doing. It is this ordinary individual who, when added to his neighbor, constitutes public opinion. And in a democracy, public opinion is based on public knowledge. It is formed by free access to information, by newspapers, by radio.
We have learned that a healthy world economy is essential for world peace. That economic distress is a disease whose evil effects spread far
He is
beyond
listening to the voice of his president this January 7th noontime in 1948. The president is urging Congress to cut the taxes of the small wage earners and to raise the taxes of large corporations. His words go through the wires of the nation's broadcast stations.
So that those least able to pay will have their burden.
Hours before, a copy of his speech was given to reporters who had it telegraphed to their local newspapers. And now, as he speaks in the Capitol building to the assembled lawmakers who represent the people, he is being heard by another group of men and women who are also representatives of the citizens who cannot be there themselves. Between him and his audience outside this chamber are the newspaper men and women, the first links in a complicated chain of a free press system. These are reporters. Their own political complexion, the ownership of the newspapers they work for, the politics in the cities they come from have very little to do with the story they will now send by wire and telegraph to over 50 million readers. The president has spoken to Congress. The people want to know what he said. The first duty of a free press is to report that speech as accurately and honestly and simply as possible. Before the president leaves the building, these reports are on their way to a waiting world. So many news stories originate in Washington that an entire skyscraper is needed just for newspaper offices. It houses the press services which play an interesting part in maintaining the freedom of the press. Their staffs serve the hundreds of newspapers throughout the nation and beyond its borders that do not have their own reporters in Washington. Little papers and big papers, city papers and country papers, Republican papers and Democratic papers, all use one or more of these press services to get facts quickly and precisely as fast as they can be prepared for transmission by telegraph. Back at the Capitol, the story of the president's tax proposal is still in the making. Because freedom of the press requires freedom of inquiry, the reporters do not accept the president's remarks as the last word. The true facts mean all the facts, and in this story, the opinions of the president's political opponents happen to be an important part of the news, for the speech has been made in an election year. These men see the president's proposals as a bid for votes, and they are just as free to say so as the reporters are to quote them. It's all part of the story of the president's speech. Here in the Washington office of a New York newspaper, the story is being prepared for publication tomorrow morning. It will be based on the actual words of the president, on how they were received by Congress, on the opinions of tax experts and political leaders, on facts that were checked and rechecked by a man whose job depends on his accuracy. It is doubtful whether his employers even know what political party the reporter belongs to, so little may his personal feelings affect his telling of the news. Nor does he feel repressed by this impersonality, for this is the tradition of the American newspaper man. Because he is not hired for his opinions, he will not be fired for them. He tries not to color the news. His obligation is to accuracy, not to self-expression. The editor who checks the story before it is sent to New York is also concerned with accuracy and completeness, not with opinion. And so they go out across the land, words that express ideas. They are the materials which will stimulate people to thought and action. Both the men and machines that transmit them have precision as their goal. A few minutes later, several hundred miles away, the electrical impulses are words again. This is the newsroom of a big city paper. The man responsible for the story now is the wire editor, another newspaper man whose business is accuracy and not opinion. If the story seems complete, he has no changes to make. He rarely adds or deletes anything from a good reporter's copy. The story is filed away until 6:30, when the managing editor, his assistant, the national editor, and the makeup editor meet to go over the news that has been collected during the day. The various department heads take their turn in presenting story after story. Each item is considered and evaluated by the entire group and then given a place in the paper. The basic tax story, because of its importance as news, is to be featured with a large headline across page 1. It will be still further emphasized by a picture of the president making the speech, so a photograph is carefully chosen to fit a place on the front page. The position of other stories about the speech is then worked out in relationship to the main story. In the meantime, in another room, in another part of the building, another meeting has taken place. This is an editorial conference. These are also editors, but they deal with opinions rather than facts. These editors usually share the newspaper's independent Republican point of view, and unlike the reporters, are free to express that point of view. To keep news and opinion separate, no editor sits at both meetings. The editorial writer never writes news stories. In this way, his opinion will not color the facts, and he develops the ability to express his ideas in strong and persuasive arguments. The man who is going to write the editorials will first discuss it with his colleagues. In this case, there is complete agreement. They are thoroughly opposed to the president's position. They believe in a balanced national budget and think it has been threatened in order to gain popularity in the coming election. The writer's job is to put these points in a cogent editorial. His readers may be influenced by his thinking, But they will also have all the facts, so they can do their own thinking as well. Another means of expressing opinions in American journalism is the cartoon. It usually reflects the editorial thinking and is therefore prepared in close collaboration with the editorial writer. The reader knows that here facts may be exaggerated or played down. The donkey is the symbol of the Democratic Party. The elephant stands for the Republican Party. The picture summarizes the newspaper's opinion that the president's idea to cut taxes is bad for the country, but it does not say so on its news pages, which carry only facts to think about so that people can decide for themselves. A relatively free metropolitan newspaper is on its way to the public. It has the freedom to criticize the highest elected official of the land, but it also has the responsibility to print the truth, factually and objectively. If it neglects that responsibility for long, readers devoted to the traditions of a free press will find another paper. For as long as competition exists, the public can exercise the final freedom by making its own choice of what paper it will read. In the rural areas of America, that choice is usually limited, but there is no less devotion to the ideals of a free press. The further people live from the centers where news is made, the greater is their dependence on the information system. The rural editor is quite different from his big city colleague. He knows most of his readers and they know him. Their interests and their problems are his, and his editorials are supposed to interpret the news in terms of those interests and problems. But even this man, who is respected and trusted as a neighbor and friend, does his counseling in the editorial columns only. And these men who live far from the cities and most of their fellow citizens are proud of the right and obligation to think for themselves. They especially want a free press and trust the editor only so long as he gives them facts as well as arguments. This paper also tends to be Republican, the party usually favored by the farmers in this area. But the editor has decided to praise the president's speech because he thinks a tax cut will mean a greater market for foodstuffs. This is against his own party's stand, but he is able to exercise his freedom without fear of political reprisal, without danger of angering his readers. He is entitled to his own opinion and may make it his readers' opinion. On the other hand, they may think differently after they have read the news for themselves. It will all be there in the morning paper. But most people in America do not live in big cities or on farms. The people who decide most major political issues live in small towns. They like to think of themselves as being fairly well informed about what is going on in the world. They listen to the radio, go to the movies, read magazines, but for the most part depend on one or two local newspapers. These average-sized newspapers rely on the press services for stories on national and international events. Their editorial policy often shifts with the turn of events or a national trend. They do not support either party regularly, since they have to please a cross-section of the community. Sometimes they are subject to pressure. The call is from a man who owns stock in the paper. The editor is used to people expressing strong opinions.
He's out to buy votes. No paper's got to speak up because business will be hurt by that tax. We'll back you up 100%.
But the editor does not have to yield to the pressure of one man. Unlike the rural editor, he tends to be guided by the opinions of all the townsmen. Talking to them is one way of finding out where they stand. The businessmen whom he meets at the local hotel have varying ideas about the president's speech. One merchant is strongly convinced it's a threat to the basic economy of the country. Why should the overtaxed businessman pay more while the laboring class is excused from any burden at all? The editor listens to him and to the opposition as well. An insurance man points out that big corporations can afford the boost, while the rising cost of living has made life more difficult for the wage earner. And the general opinion of the group is that a tax cut will mean more money in the average pocketbook. And to them, that means more sales and more profit. As businessmen, therefore, if not as individuals, They tend to regard the president's proposal as a good one. And so the talk seems to go around the town. Whether or not the proposal is good economics, it is nevertheless a popular idea. The people who will save on their tax bill are certainly for it, and so are the people with whom they will trade. As the editor returns to his office, his head is full of ideas about the editorial that must be written for tomorrow morning's paper. But there was that stockholder who called. Maybe it would be a good idea to check with the publisher. He doesn't usually dictate policy, but it doesn't take long to tell him what happened.
Hello, Jack.
Hello there.
Wilson called. He's a little bothered about Truman's proposal. He asked what the paper was going to do about it.
Let Wilson run his business. He may own stock in my paper, but he doesn't run my paper and he doesn't own it. I'm still the publisher and you're the editor. Remember, it's circulation that counts. You go ahead. I'll take care of the complaints. You take care of the editorial.
Okay, Jack. 9.
It's easy to write after that. The president's proposed tax cut is a great thing, this editorial will say. Let's get Congress to pass it, he urges. But that doesn't mean the voters have to support the president in November. The election is another matter. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And so another free newspaper has been put together. And so on the morning of January 8th, 1948, did the people learn about a speech that was made the day before in the city of Washington, D.C. It was a speech that concerned their lives, and so it was their business. Theirs to know, theirs to think about, and theirs to act on. Some wanted help in planning their action. Others didn't even bother reading the story. But some read every word, including the editorial. And some agreed and thought it was fine, while others grew angry and said the country was going to the dogs. But for a few pennies, everyone had the chance to read the facts. And in a democracy, that chance, called freedom of the press, is as precious as life itself. It goes on every day with little stories and big stories, and sometimes people take that chance too much for granted. They forget how necessary to freedom itself is the freedom to get facts. Several years ago, a fearsome disaster took place in a mine in the Middle West. Over 100 men were killed in an explosion. And while women wept and a nation grieved, a bold newspaper began to ask questions. Why did it happen? Whose fault was it? Embarrassing, dangerous questions, especially since the trail led to irresponsible owners and corrupt officials. But the questions were asked, and the answers printed, and even the threat of violence did not stop the relentless pursuit of truth. Through the fearless newspaper stories, the facts became known to the public, and in a short time the papers were able to announce the defeat of those same officials at the hands of an informed electorate. It's the same fight that's been going on for 200 years. The fight to collect the news and print the news without restrictions of any kind. The traditions of John Peter Zenger are alive today, and the men and women who keep them alive are proud of their role. They're not just writing a story about a speech. They're keeping people informed about what's going on in the world. They're handling the powerful ammunition of truth. They're keeping the press free, and thus keeping the liberty of their land.